So good afternoon, everyone. Sir, I am audible, sir. Sitaram, sir.
Yes, audible, sir.
Yes. So good afternoon, everyone. Om Dhanvantraya Namah. So let's begin the webinar. That is nothing but Indriya Amrutam. So already just now we have finished the inauguration session. Now we will begin with our resource person. So today's resource person is none other than Dr. Sitaram Mithantaya, sir. Sir is presently working as a professor in the Department of Rachana Sharir, Ayurvedic Medical College, Nadiad, Gujarat. Sir has completed his UG from ALN Rao, Koppa. Sir has postgraduated from SDM Ayurved College, Udupi. Sir is pursuing presently PhD from Gujarat Ayurved University. Sir has a teaching experience of 10 years and he is a recognized PG guide and guiding many PG students since 5 years. Sir has presented more than 16 research papers in various journals, articles at different national and international levels. Sir has delivered more than 7 guest lectures at national, international conferences. Sir has also delivered many talks on TV and given talks in radio also. Sir has participated more than 50 seminars at state, national and international levels and chaired in few of them. Sir has received many best oral presentation award at national, international levels. Sir's recent achievement is Sir has awarded with best dissector of the year of the present year from Gujarat. With this short introduction, I request our today's guest, Dr. Sitaram sir, to present his session. Sir, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for a brief introduction. It's my privilege to present the topic in front of August audience, and I thank Ayurved Mahavidyalaya Hubli for considering me for this noble task. Let us directly start with the presentation. So shall I share my slide?
Yes, sir. Please share, sir. Please share. I have made you co-host, sir. You can share it.
Yeah, yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. It is visible, sir.
Visible, no? Yeah. So, anatomy, the topic which is given to me is anatomy of eye.
Yes, sir.
So, eye is an, yeah, can you hear me?
Some students are not able to join, so please allow them. Sir.
Yeah, they can actually they can join or they can see live on Facebook. Okay, just I'll share I have shared the Facebook ID also. Okay, as the Zoom has the capacity of 100 only, so we are giving live to Facebook. You can go and see in Ayurved Mahavidyalaya Hubli Facebook page. Okay, or else we will this is a recorded also. We'll put later also. Okay. Sorry for that. Sorry, sir, for interrupting you. Sir, you can continue.
Yeah, thank you. So the topic which is given to me is anatomy of eye, and it is a big task to complete the entire anatomy of eye in 1 hour stipulated time. So I'll try my best to reach the requirements of audience. And let me start. So coming to introduction, So being a sensory organ, so first let us see the sensory organs. So the main motto of sensory organ to identify the changes which occur in the environment which surround us. And the sensory organ can be categorized under two parts, like the organ which provide information about stimuli and events in our immediate environment, like the sense of touch, smell, and of course taste. And those organ which provide information about stimuli and event that are farther away, like vision and audition. So the one among is the vision, which is very, very important to identify the changes which occur at farther away, and to decide whether to approach that change or to respond to that change or to avoid that change from being present far away from the environment. The eye provide a continuous monitoring of all we do, especially in manual tasks. The visual means of communication have proved more valuable and lasting than auditory means. The gradual evolution of the visual signs reacting with auditory communication has led to formation of language and all its permutation. So this is the main impact of the visual and auditory, the hand-to-hand approach of visual and auditory communication, which evolved, which result in the evolution of the languages. Now coming to the concept in Ayurveda. So Ayurveda, Urdhvanga Chikitsa is considered to be the best among the Ashtanga Ayurveda, because it concerned with the management of Indriyas, and among them Netra Chikitsa is utmost important. That is why it is called as the Sarvendriyanam Nayana Pradhanam. Now coming to the Netra Sharira, we get a good reference regarding the Netra Sharira in Sushruta Samhita Uttara Tantra. So the structure of the and dimensions of the Netra has been clearly defined by the Sushruta with the reference Vidyat Dvayangula Bahulyam Swanguštodara Samhitam Dvayangulam Sarvatah Sardam Nayanam Sardamidam Nayana Budbudam Subratam Gostanakaram Sarvabhuta Gunodbhavam, where he says the Netra Golaka, it is located or it is placed at a depth of 2 angula, and it has the depth of 2 angula, and it has the measurement of one's own the udara of angushta, that is the part of the thumb, and its measurement is about 2 angula from all the side, and it has the shape of teeth of a cow, and it is formed from all the Mahabhuta. And further, we get reference regarding the Netra Paryaya in different texts, which includes the Gosthana, Gambhari, Draksha Phala, Aksha, Lochana, Nayana, Darshana, Ikshana, Chakshu, Akshini, Druk, Drashti, Netra, Prekshanam. So these are the different Paryayas we get for the Netra in Ayurvedic texts and other texts, other books. Now coming to the role of Mahabhuta, and its that is the role of Mahabhuta in the formation of the Netra. So Sushruta in first chapter of Uttara Tantra give detail regarding how 5 Mahabhuta involve in the formation of Netra and its different part. He says that the Prithvi Mahabhuta is involved, or its contribution is there at most in the formation of the Mamsa, whereas from Agni the Rakta is formed. Vata results in the formation of the Krishna region of the Netra, and the whatever Jala is there in the Netra is formed from the whatever the Shweta part is there in the Netra is formed from the Jala, and the Ashrumarga is formed from the Akasha. And in 7th chapter, we get one more reference regarding the role of Mahabhuta, where we get reference that all the Mahabhuta involved in the formation of the Drishti or Drishti Mandala, which has the dimension of about Masuradala. Now coming to the Dosha Dhatu Mala in the Netra. Dosha include pranavata, alochaka pitta, tarpaka kapha. Dhatu like rasa, rakta, mamsa, meda, asti, and mala is the khamala. Now coming to the parts, Sushruta says that mandalani cha sandhischa, patalani cha lochane, yathakramam vijaniyat pancha shadcha shadevacha. So these are the main parts of the netra. They are mandala, sandhi, and patala. So he says there are 5 mandala, 6 sandhi, and 6 patalas. The mandalas include Pakshma mandala, Vartma mandala, Shweta mandala, and Drishti mandala. The sandhis include, the sandhis are nothing but the junction between the mandala. So the between Pakshma and Vartma we find Pakshma Vartma Gata. Between Vartma and Shukla we find Vartma Shukla Gata. Shukla and Krishna we find Shukla Krishna Gata. Krishna and Drishti we find Krishna Drishti Gata, and to outside Kaninika and Apanga. The Pakshma Mandala can be considered as the layer or a row along which the eyelashes are attached. Vartma is nothing but the eyelid. Shweta, the visual white area, that is, we can say that sclera. Krishna can be correlated as cornea and iris. And Drishti can be said as the aperture which we see, pupil and the retina. And the junction between these can be considered as the sandhi. The kaninika is the inner canthus, whereas apanga can be correlated to the outer canthus. Now, other than these, mandala and sandhi, eyes are also studied in a different way, that is based on the patala. So they include the 6 patalas, and they are categorized as the abhyantara patala and bahya patala. The bahya patala are 2 vartmagata patala, so that is upper eyelid and lower eyelid, and the abhyantara are 4: tejo jalashrita, mamsashrita, medo ashrita, and asti ashrita patala. So these are the layers of the netra as per Ayurveda. So I'm not going to deal in detail regarding these description due to lack of time. So let us enter into the contemporary anatomy, where we'll see the anatomy of the eyeball. Structurally, eye and functionally, eye can be correlated to that of the camera. The different parts of the eye can be correlated to the parts of the camera, like a cornea. It acts like the lens cover. The iris acts like the shutter of the camera. The pupil acts like the aperture of the camera. Lens acts like lens of the camera, whereas the retina acts like a film of the camera. So in this way, we can correlate with the camera with the eyeball. Eyes. First we'll see the location where the eyes are located. The eyes they rest in 2 bony orbit. There are 2 eyes, and each one is located in its own orbit. They are located on either side of the nose. It is the only anterior most part which is visible, that is, which is exposed among the entire eye. Rest, about 5/6 of the part is not visible. Each eye is connected with the brain by the optic nerve. You can see here. So this is the optic nerve which connect the eye with the cerebrum. We'll see the parts, like first one, conjunctiva. It is a thin layer of mucous membrane which lines the undersurface of the eyelid and reflected on the anterior part of the eyeball. You can see here. So this is the reflected eyelid. You can see here. Can you see the cursor? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is the part of the eyelid which is reflected. You can see this part of the eyelid is lined by all around. It is lined by the conjunctiva. So as it is lining the palpebra, that is eyelid, this part of conjunctiva is known as the palpebral conjunctiva. And on the other hand, the conjunctiva extends beyond the eyelid and it covers the sclera. And this part of the conjunctiva is known as the bulbar conjunctiva. So it is divided into two parts, palpebral part and bulbar part. Coming to the functions of the conjunctiva, it is a membrane that produces mucus, and this lubricates the eye and prevents it from the dryness, and thus it protects the eyeball. Now coming to the muscles, the muscles of the eyeball can be categorized under two headings: extraocular muscles and intraocular muscles. Intraocular muscles we'll see later while we see the different codes of the eyeball. Now coming to the extraocular muscles. The extraocular muscles are concerned with the movement of the eyeball. So our eyes are not fixed. Depending upon the need and depending upon the visual field, we need to change the position of eyeball, and this position of the eyeball can be changed when we can move the eyeball. Then only we can change the position of the eyeball. And this can be done by the help of the muscles which are connected to it. There are total 6 muscles which are connected to the eyeball. They include the 4 recti. You can see here. So these are the 4 recti: superior rectus, inferior rectus, superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial rectus, and lateral rectus. So as their position, they suggest the movement. Superior rectus pulls the eyeball above. Inferior rectus pulls the eyeball below, downwards, medial and lateral. And there are 2 oblique muscles, the superior oblique and inferior oblique. With the arrow, you can see how they help. They rotate. They help in the rotation of the eyeball. Now these muscles, they are attached to the equator of the eyeball. Clear? They are attached to the sclera, outermost cover, and they are supplied by some cranial nerves. Like there is a formula to remember it, like LR6, SO4, and rest by 3. LR6, that is lateral rectus by the 6th cranial nerve. SO4, that is superior oblique, is by the 4th cranial nerve. And the remaining all 3, that is superior rectus, medial rectus, inferior rectus, and inferior oblique, they are supplied by the 3rd cranial nerve. Okay, so that much is related to extraocular muscles. Now let us see the actual structure of the eyeball. The eyeball is merely round structure, round organ, consisting of an elastic wall with a cavity inside. So the wall, the outermost wall, is elastic and inelastic with a cavity inside. The cavity is filled with some structure that we'll see in the later part. The wall is formed by 3 coats. They are also known as the tunics. They are from outside to inside. The outer fibrous coat, so this is the outer fibrous coat, which is made up of fibrous tissue. The middle vascular coat, as its name suggests, it is highly vascular. And innermost nervous coat, which is the coat which is responsible for the vision. Clear? So these are the 3 coats of the eyeball. In the future slide, we'll be seeing the individual coats. So coming to the outer fibrous coat. So it is the outer layer which is inelastic, and it is the supporting membrane of the eyeball. The fibrous coat can be divided into 2 parts. The anterior 1/6 part, which is transparent and known as the cornea, whereas posterior 5/6 part, which is opaque, known as the sclera. Clear? So it has the anterior 1/6 part and posterior 5/6 part. The largest part of the fibrous coat is opaque, whereas the cornea is transparent, which allow the light to flow inside. Clear? You can see the difference here. One is more convex, That is, sclera is more convex, cornea is more convex than that of the sclera. Okay. So we'll see the cornea first. It is a clear, colorless, smooth, and transparent layer. So as I said earlier, it is a transparent layer and it is a smooth layer. It is avascular. This is very, very important. The cornea is avascular. Any presence of blood vessels in the cornea suggests that there is inflammation. Then it looks elliptical anteriorly and circular posteriorly, and it has the diameter about 11.5 millimeter, and thickness it is thinner near the center, whereas the thickness increases towards the periphery. It is about 0.5 to 0.6 millimeter in thickness in the center, whereas the thickness is about 0.6 to 0.8 millimeter at the periphery. So peripheral part is more thicker than that of the central part. The cornea is sensitive to touch, temperature, and chemicals. The cornea has 5 layers from outside to inside. The layers are, you can see in the image, the epithelial layer, corneal epithelium. Then there is a layer of Bowman's layer. Then there is a thick layer of the thick layer of the stroma. Then next to stroma is the Descemet's membrane, and the innermost layer is the endothelium. So these are the 5 layers of the cornea. The specific arrangement of the stromal cells make the cornea transparent. Next, coming to the sclera. It is a pale white, strong, opaque layer forming posterior 5/6 of the fibrous coat. It is slightly elastic layer which maintain the shape of the eyeball. Its average thickness is about 1 millimeter. It is thicker compared to the cornea. So the cornea is about it ranges from 0.6 to 0.8, whereas the sclera is about 1 millimeter in thickness. It is made up of a bundle of collagen fibers with the connective tissue corpuscle. It is covered by the Tennant's capsule and episcleral tissue. So this is the very important thing. Whenever during dissection, when we open the orbital plate and enter into the orbital cavity from cranial cavity, then the first structure we could identify is the fat. When we clear the fat, we find the white capsule, white covering, which is nothing but the Tennant's capsule. So usually the beginners will have a confusion regarding the Tennant's capsule and the sclera. So if you clear the Tennant's capsule, then only you can find the sclera. Then very important thing, sclera receives insertion of the recti muscles. Earlier I said there are recti muscles, the superior rectus, inferior rectus, medial and lateral rectus. They get attached to the sclera. You can see here the attachment of the sclera or insertion of the recti muscles to the sclera. So these are the 4 recti muscle what you are seeing here. Now coming to the limbus. So it is a transitional zone between the cornea and sclera. You can see here. So up to here, this is the sclera, and from this line onwards, it is the cornea. And the junction between the sclera and cornea is the limbus, which makes a circular outline. Clear? Circular outline. So this angle can be said as Krishna Shukla Gata Sandhi. Okay. Now coming to the, so with that I finished with the fibrous coat. Next we'll see the vascular coat. The vascular coat is also known as the uveal tract. It is the second layer or middle layer of the eyeball. It supplies the nutrition to the third layer. As it is a vascular coat, it supplies nutrition. It is formed by 3 parts. That is iris, ciliary body, and choroid. So in other sense, the uveal tract can be divided into 2 parts, anterior uvea and posterior uvea. The anterior uvea include the iris and ciliary body, whereas posterior uvea contain the choroid. We'll see one by one. First, coming to iris. It is a circular pigmented diaphragm hanging between the cornea anteriorly and lens posteriorly. You can see here. So this is the cornea and this is the lens. Now between the cornea and lens, you can see one shutter-like structure. So this is nothing but the iris. It has a central perforation, which is known as the pupil. You can see in this image. So there is a central perforation. The whatever you are seeing here. So this is nothing but the cornea. Behind the cornea, whatever you are seeing. So because cornea is transparent, behind that whatever you are seeing. So that is nothing but the iris. And there is a central aperture which is known as the pupil. The iris divide the anterior chamber, that is the space between the cornea and lens, into two parts. The anterior compartment, that is the space between the cornea and the lens, into two parts. The anterior chamber, which lies between the cornea and iris, and the posterior chamber, which lies between the iris and lens. Its peripheral part is attached to the anteromedial part of the ciliary body. So this part of the vascular coat is known as the ciliary body. Now iris is attached to the anteromedial part of the ciliary body here. Clear? Now coming to the color of the iris. The color of iris is determined by number of pigment cells in its connective tissue. If the pigment cells are abundant, the iris appear blue in color. If the pigment cells are absent, the iris appears blue in color due to diffusion of light in front of the black posterior surface. So that is the reason why few people have blue eye. And in albinism, when there is no totally absent pigment, the eyeball appear white. Iridial muscles. So one of the intraocular muscle present in the iris. There are two muscles present in the iris. They are dilator pupil and constrictor pupil. You can see here the outer muscle. It is the dilator pupil, and the inner circular muscle is the constrictor pupil. The dilator pupil, when it constricted, it causes dilatation of the pupil. You can see here the pupil, the aperture is increased in its size, and it is due to contraction of the dilator pupillae muscle, and it is supplied by sympathetic nerve through long ciliary nerve. The constriction of the constrictor or sphincter pupillae causes constriction of the pupil. It causes narrowing of the aperture of the pupil, and it is supplied by parasympathetic supply. It has a parasympathetic supply and passes through oculomotor via short ciliary nerve. That much is related to iridial muscle. Now coming to the pupil. So as I said earlier, it is the central aperture of the iris. You can see here. So this is the central aperture. It is about 3 to 4 millimeter in diameter, and this aperture, it regulates the amount of eye which enter into the eyeball, amount of light which enter into the eyeball. If a bright eye is exposed, if eye is exposed to a bright eye, the pupil reduces in its size. It gets constricted. Whereas in dim light, to allow large amount of light to enter, the pupil dilates, and that how it occurs, that we saw in the previous slide. The constricted in the daytime or in bright illumination, whereas it is dilated in the night and in dull or in dim illumination. Now next, moving to the ciliary body, the second part of the vascular cord. It is the thickest part of the uveal tract. It extends from posterior limit of the limbus to the ora serrata. You can see here. So this is the limbus, the sclera and cornea, the junction. So it begins from here, and here in the nervous cord, there is a structure known as the ora serrata that we'll be seeing later. So it extends from this point to this point. Okay. So if you take a section here, it appears triangular in cross section. and it has two parts, pars plicata and pars plana. Pars plicata is vascular anterior part, and it is rough, it is rigid. And you can see there are ridges, there are about 70 ciliary ridges, also known as the ciliary processes, which give attachment to suspensory ligament of the lens or zonule of Zinn. The posterior part is known as the pars plana. As its name suggests, it is plain or it is smooth. There is no ridges present in the plana, and it is avascular. Now coming to the zonule of Zinn or ciliary zonule. It is a ring of fibrous band which connects ciliary body with the lens. You can see here. So this is the pars plicata, the red structure what you are seeing, circular pars plicata, and the central is the lens. Now this blue zone which connect pars plicata with the lens, this circular zone is known as zonule of Zinn. If you take a section here, you can find here, so the section that the pars plicata and lens. So, and this zone where we find the suspensory ligament is nothing but the zonule of Zinn, which surrounds the lens from all around. So we are saying in one position here from side, and in this image we are seeing it from the front. So in front, if you are seeing it from front, you can see a circular zone. Clear? Now this zone is also known, or the fibers in the zone are also known as the suspensory ligament of the lens, as it suspends the lens. Now coming to the ciliary muscles. The ciliary body has a few important muscles. Because of the action of these muscles, the accommodation of lens takes place. A ring of unstripped, it has a ring of unstripped muscle having three layers. They are longitudinal layer or meridian layer, the radial layer, and circular layer. The longitudinal layer or meridional layer arises from the a projection of sclera near the limbus. You can see here, from here the meridional fiber arises, meridional fiber arises, and they run backwards to the suprachoroidal lamina. So they run backward like this. Clear? From here begin and run posteriorly. The radial fiber are obliquely placed. You can see here, so these fibers, they are obliquely placed, whereas circular fiber are innermost, and they lie within the anterior part of the ciliary body, and they lie near the lens. The contraction of all the three parts, the three muscles, relaxes the suspensory ligament. Like from all around, the fibers are contracting, muscle fibers are contracting. So the ligaments which are there, they get relaxed, and this relaxation of the ligament causes lens to become convex. The convexity of the lens increases with the relaxation of the ciliary muscles. Ligaments, and ciliary muscles or the suspensory ligaments get relaxed by the contraction of the ciliary muscles. Again, these muscles include or constitute what is known as the intraocular muscles. Again, these are supplied by the parasympathetic nerve via oculomotor. So next, moving to the third part of the vascular cord, choroid. The choroid is a thin pigmented layer. It separates the posterior part of the sclera from the retina. You can see here the sclera, outermost layer, and the yellow colored layer, retina. Now between these two, the red layer, what you are saying, so that is the choroid, which separates sclera from the retina. Anteriorly, it ends at the ora serrata. You can see here this zone, zigzag line zone. So this is the ora serrata. At here, it ends by continuing with the ciliary body. Whereas posteriorly, it is perforated by the entry of the optic nerve. Optic nerve pierces the choroid and enter into the eyeball. Its outer surface is separated from the sclera by the suprachoroidal lamina. There is a lamina known as the suprachoroidal lamina which separates it from the sclera. Its attachment to the sclera is loose. It can be easily stripped from the sclera, whereas it is firmly attached with the retina. It consists of 4 layers. The layers you can see here, the outermost layer, the suprachoroidal lamina. So this is the sclera, inner part of sclera. Next is suprachoroidal lamina. Then there is a thickest layer of the vessels, which is known as the vascular lamina, having two variety of vessels, large vessel vascular layer and a small vessels layer. And next to that, there is a choriocapillary lamina, and the innermost is the inner basal lamina or membrane of Bruch. Now, this thickest layer of vessel is the reason why this layer is known as vascular coat. So that much is related to the layers of the sclera, layers of the choroid. Next, coming to the innermost coat, that is a nervous coat known as the retina. This is the thin and delicate inner layer. It continues posteriorly with the optic nerve. You can see here this yellow layer. This is retina. This represents the retina, and posteriorly it continues with the optic nerve. The outer surface of the retina is attached to the choroid. You can see here, as I said earlier, it is firmly attached, whereas inner surface is separated from the vitreous body by a membrane known as the hyaloid membrane. There is a membrane which separates it from the vitreous body. The retina diminishes in thickness from behind forward. You can see here in this image, the retina is thickest posteriorly, whereas its thickness decreases as it moves forward. And it is divided into three parts: the optic part, ciliary part, and iridial part. The optic part is it contains nervous tissue, and this part is sensitive to light because it contains the receptors. It extends from optic disc posteriorly, and anteriorly it ends at the ora serrata. This zigzag zone, what you are seeing. So this is the ora serrata where it ends. The iridial and ciliary part, they are non-nervous and insensitive layer beyond the ora serrata. The retina continues beyond this layer, beyond this ora serrata, but this part, it is insensitive to light because it does not contain any of the receptors. The part which line the iris is known as the iridial part which line the ciliary body is known as the ciliary part. Optic disc, it is the circular layer circular area opposite the entrance of the optic nerve. So in the earlier image we saw, this is the side where optic nerve is entering in the eyeball. Now this part where the optic nerve is entering, that part appears like a disc under fundoscopy, and that part is known as the optic disc, which has the diameter of about 1.5 millimeter in diameter. Next, physiological cup or physiological blind spot. Optic disc has a central depression. The depressed area of optic disc is known as the physiological cup, and as it does not contain any rods and cones, this part is insensitive to light, and that is why that part is known as the physiological blind spot. Next, there is one more circular area about 3 millimeter lateral to the optic disc at the posterior pole, which is known as the macula lutea. Macula lutea, which is the avascular yellow structure in the retina. Next is the fovea centralis. The fovea centralis is the central depression in the macula. So you can see here in the macula, there is a central depressed part. That part is known as the fovea centralis. It is the thinnest part of the retina. You can see here in the image. So this part, it is the thinnest part of the retina. So you can see here throughout the retina. So this part, the fovea, the deepest part of the macula, it is the thinnest part of the retina. The importance of this fovea centralis is it contains cones only. there is no retina in the, there is no rods in this site, and this is the site of maximum activity of vision. Now coming to the two receptors, rods and cones. These are the light receptors of the eye, and the function of the eye is because of these two specialized cells. The rod contain a pigment called as the visual purple, which responds to the dim light, which this type of vision is known as the scotopic vision. The periphery of the retina contain only rods, whereas they are absent in the fovea. In the earlier image, we saw that the peripheral part contain only rod. As it move for backward in the fovea centralis, there is no rod. It is totally rods are totally absent in the central part, that is in the fovea centralis. Now coming to the cones. The cones respond to the bright light, that is known as the photopic vision. So these are the two type of vision, photopic vision and scotopic vision. So, and that is the reason of difference in vision during night and during the dim light, or in the dark and in the bright light. The bright light, under the bright light, you can identify the shape, size, color, whereas in the dim light, you can identify the shape, you can identify the size, but not color. Whatever you see, it is black, but you can identify the shape of the object which is there in front. And the difference is because of the rods and cones. The cones which have the pigments and they are sensitive to light, whereas the rods, they are not sensitive to light. They can't identify the color. The cones, as I said earlier, they are sensitive to color. The fovea centralis has only cone. It is quite opposite to the rods, where rods are totally absent. There only we find cones. That is in the fovea only cones, whereas where rods are abundant, there is no cones, or they are very less. Now coming to the layers of retina, there are 10 layers, or the structures are arranged in 10 layers. From outside to inside, the layers are as follows. They are pigmented epithelium, which contain the pigment cells. The second layer is photoreceptor area, or photoreceptor layer, which contain rods and cones. Then there is a layer of limiting membrane. Beyond that, there is a nuclear layer, where we find the nucleus of the rods and cones. The fifth is the outer plexiform layer, where we find the synapses and plexus between the receptor cells and the other cells, or the cells in the inner nuclear layer. Then we find inner nuclear layer, where we find 4 varieties of cell. They are Muller cells, bipolar cell, amacrine cells, and horizontal cells. The 7th is the inner plexiform layer, where we find the nerve plexus between the nuclear layer, the cells of the nuclear layer, and the ganglion cell. The inner ganglion cell layer contain ganglion cells. And the 9th layer, it is the nerve fiber layer, contain the axons at surface of the retina passing via optic nerve, chiasma, and tract. Clear? And the innermost layer is the inner limiting membrane. So these are the 10 layer and the components of the 10 layers of retina. Now coming to the supply of retina. The retina is supplied by the central artery of retina. The artery passes through the optic nerve, and it enters into the central aperture of the optic disc. There immediately divide into superior and inferior branch. And each superior and inferior branch divide into the medial and lateral, or otherwise known as the temporal and the nasal branch. And vein follow the course of the artery. Coming to the applied anatomy, retinal detachment. It occurs between the outer single pigmented layer and inner 9 nervous layer. Okay, so earlier we saw the layers of retina. This pigmented layer get detached, or the remaining 9 layer get detached from the pigmented layer. Then this condition is known as the retinal detachment. Of course, it is the interretinal detachment. It is not the entire 10 layers of retina is not getting detached. It is the 9 layer of retina getting detached from the 10th layer. as a treatment, a silicon sponge can be put over the detached retina and kept in position by a band. Okay, so that is the management of the retinal detachment. Now coming to the aqueous humor, it is a clear fluid which fills the anterior segment. As I said earlier, anterior segment, it is the chamber, it is the part between the cornea and lens. Now this entire anterior chamber filled with one clear fluid known as the aqueous humor. This space is divided into two parts by the iris, into anterior chamber between the iris and cornea, and posterior chamber between iris and lens. Now these two chambers communicate through the pupil. This part I have already explained in the previous slide. Now formation of the aqueous humor. The aqueous humor is formed in the capillary plexus which are located in the ciliary process of the near the posterior chamber. Now the capillary plexus here, from these capillary plexus, aqueous humor is formed, and the formed aqueous humor passes into the anterior chamber by passing through the pupil, and it drained into the anterior capillary veins, anterior ciliary veins, through by passing through a space known as the canal of Schlemm. You can see here there is a canal at the junction at the peripheral part of the iris, which is known as the canal of Schlemm. Now the aqueous humor passes through it and finally drain into the scleral venous sinus. This fluid is rich in ascorbic acid, glucose, and amino acids, and it has the function of nourishing avascular structure of the cornea and lens. Both lens and cornea are avascular, and they require their nutrition, and their nutritional demand is fulfilled by this fluid. Now, there is a clinical condition in association with the fluid, glaucoma. The interference with the drainage of the aqueous humor, if excessive secretion is there or inadequate drainage is there. In both these conditions, the amount of fluid may get increase in the anterior segment. This causes increase in the intraocular pressure, and as a result there will be bulge in the cornea, one thing, and it also causes cupping of the optic disc, and as a result the retina will get atrophy. So it causes pressure atrophy of the retina, and as a result the person may become blind. Now coming to the lens, it is a transparent biconvex structure placed between anterior and posterior segment. You can see here in the earlier diagram we saw, between the anterior segment and posterior segment, between that there is lens. It is circular in outline, and it has the diameter of about 1 centimeter. It has two poles. The center part of the anterior surface is known as the anterior pole, whereas center part of the posterior surface is known as the posterior pole. If you join a line between the anterior and posterior pole, then that forms the axis. The margin of the lens is known as the equator, where the suspensory ligaments are attached. The lens contribute 15 diopters to the total 58 dioptric power of the eyeball, and this dioptric power is adaptable. The posterior surface of lens is more convex than that of the anterior surface. The anterior surface is kept flattened by the tension by the suspensory ligament, and the convexity can be increased when the suspensory ligament get relaxed by the contraction of the iridial muscles. The contraction of the ciliary muscle relaxes the ligament and causes the convexity of the lens. This accounts for the accommodation of the lens depending upon the need of the vision. If you are seeing far object and if you are seeing near object, you need the different convexity of the lens, and that can be adapted by this process of the relaxation of the suspensory ligament. Now the lens is enclosed in a elastic capsule. I think I am getting echo. Am I audible to you? So lens is enclosed in an elastic capsule, which is transparent and structureless. So outermost is the elastic capsule, which is transparent and structureless. The deep to the capsule, there is a layer of the cell, which is known as the capsular epithelium. The center of the anterior surface, it is made up of a single layer of cubical cell, whereas periphery, the cell become columnar. The fibers are concentrically arranged, and these columnar cells produces the fibers, and these fibers are concentrically arranged. You can see the arrangement of fiber, how they are arranged. They are concentrically arranged, and they are arranged in such a way that the central part contain most oldest fiber, and that constitute the nucleus, whereas peripheral part contain the newly formed fiber. The fiber move from out periphery to center, and the center contain oldest fiber. And this particular arrangement of the fiber make the lens transparent. Now the vitreous humor. It is a colorless jelly-like transparent mass which fills the posterior segment. Like anterior segment is filled with the aqueous humor, posterior surface, posterior segment contain the vitreous humor or vitreous body. It is enclosed in a delicate membrane known as the hyaloid membrane, which separates it from the retina. The anterior surface of the vitreous body is indented. It is depressed by the lens and the ciliary body. You can see here there is a depression in the anterior surface. And this transmits the light within the posterior segment. It holds the retina in its position, and the main function is it contributes to the intraocular pressure. Clear? And this is why because of the vitreous humor, the retina is kept in its position. Now we'll see few applied anatomy related to the eyeball. Few of them we have already seen. Few more we'll see now. The cornea can be grafted from one person to another. So this is very, very important. A will can change life of a person. So if you plan to donate your cornea, it can be give life to one person. So because the cornea is avascular, so it can be easily transplanted. Injury to the cornea may cause opacity. You can see this image, so where you can find corneal opacity, and this opacity can interfere with the vision. Slide, continue. Eye is a very sensitive organ. Even a dust particle give rise to inflammation and pain. The bulbar conjunctiva is a vascular. Inflammation of the conjunctiva leads to conjunctivitis. You can see here how the neovascularization is there. The look of the palpebral conjunctiva is used to diagnosis of few diseases, like to judge the hemoglobin level, to see the icterus, etc. Diabetic retinopathy. High blood sugar level can damage the blood vessels in the retina. When they are damaged, they can leak fluid or bleed. This causes the retina to swell and form deposits. Keratitis. It is the inflammation of the cornea. It can be caused by infection, trauma, dry eyes, UV exposure, contact lens overwear, and degeneration. The symptoms of the keratitis include the pain and profuse tearing. Correcting of the eye. The image where it falls, that decide the acuity of vision. If vision falls properly on the retina, then we will have a proper vision. The proper vision or correct focus is known as the emmetropia. Nearsightedness, it is also known as the myopia, where focus of the light falls in front of the retina. It does not exactly fall on the retina, but it fall in front of the retina, where the eyeball is too long or lens is too strong. If lens is not accommodating properly, then it causes the nearsightedness. The distant objects are blurry in this condition. Farsightedness, the hyperopia, the focus of the light beyond the retina. It falls beyond the retina. It falls behind the retina. If a short eyeball is there or a lazy lens is there, then it causes farsightedness. The near objects are blurry in this condition. So this is how the image falls on exactly on the retina in case of the emmetropia. And this is myopia, where the image is falling short to the retina. So retina is here, but image is falling here. That is why he can't see the object which is far. Then this is the condition where image is falling behind the retina. That is, when object is kept near, the image has to fall here, but because of the short eyeball or the lazy lens, the image falls here. Clear? So that condition is known as the hyperopia. If the the lens and cornea has a unusual curvatures, abnormal curvatures, then it will cause astigmatism, where multiple images will fall on the retina. So there will be haziness in the vision. So that much is related to the anatomy of eyeball. So before I finish, so make your eyes alive after death, and this can be done, or you can keep your eyes alive when you plan to donate your eyes. So please donate your eyes. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And this is a very wonderful session and eye-opening session, what I say. And sir has virtually dissected the eyeball and he made the concept very easy. So for that, may wholeheartedly, I will say thanks to Dr. Sitaram sir. And we are expecting same in the future also. Thank you very much, sir.
So thank you, sir. If anyone has any doubts, I may try to answer.
So right now there are no any such doubts, sir. In chat box is empty almost, sir.
Yeah.
Now the session is open for discussion. Anybody has got doubts, please ask with the sir. Hello? Now the session is open for discussion. If you have got any doubts, please ask with sir. Sir, with this we can conclude, no sir? Thank you.
Yes.
Anything you want to say? Just
Yeah,
in
sir.
space.
This is my pleasure to extend my sincere thanks to the principal of Hubli Ayurvedic College, Dr. Prashanta sir, for giving this opportunity to present lecture in the series of Indriyamritam. This is a very good job because the Indriyas are very hard topics, which is very difficult to understand. If you have repeated sessions, like you have the regular lecture class and additional such guest lectures, the student will feel they feel very easy to assimilate it and understand it. And I also extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Hunugan sir, HOD of Rachana Shari department, for wonderful arranging such wonderful events. I also extend my sincere thanks to Prakash Rathod sir, Ravi sir, Pradeep sir, my friend, and Dr. Nandita madam for arranging such a webinar. And I also extend my principal of my institute, Professor Kalapi Patel sir, for giving this opportunity to me to present. And I also extend my HOD Swati Bedekar madam and all my colleagues for their support. And thank you for all the audience who have patiently listened to me.
Thank you very much, sir.
So with this, sir, we will conclude. So tomorrow we'll meet again at 10 a.m. The tomorrow's resource person is Dr. Muralidhar Vadigar sir. So tomorrow we are already we have planned to share it on YouTube directly. Okay, so today we'll share the YouTube link also. Today we have some issues with the Facebook. So tomorrow we'll share with this YouTube. Okay. So with this, I conclude and end the session, sir. Sir, thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.